It began on what should have been a perfectly ordinary summer evening. The kind of evening when the cicadas hum in the trees, sprinklers hiss across neatly trimmed lawns, and the golden light of the setting sun stretches across quiet suburban streets. For the Williams family, that evening would be remembered forever, not for its beauty, but for the moment their lives shattered. 6-year-old Ethan Williams was playing in the backyard. His mother, Karen, had just stepped inside to grab a pitcher of lemonade, leaving the screen door ajar. His father, Michael, was mowing the front lawn, the distant rumble of the machine drowning out the gentle laughter of his son chasing fireflies. When Karen returned, less than 2 minutes later, the yard was empty. Ethan was gone. At first, it was confusion. Maybe he'd wandered toward the side gate? Maybe he'd run inside without her noticing? Karen called out his name, Ethan, her voice rising with each unanswered echo. Within moments, that confusion turned to panic. The search began immediately. Neighbors spilled into the streets, forming frantic lines combing through woods, culverts, and ditches. Flashlights cut through the night as helicopters circled above. The police arrived within the hour, tape sealing off the Williams backyard as if it were a crime scene, though no crime had yet been proven. And yet, from that moment on, something felt wrong. Something heavy, unspeakable hung in the air. Detectives interviewed everyone in the neighborhood. Doors were knocked on, garages inspected, sheds unlocked under the watchful eyes of officers. Neighbors whispered among themselves, "It couldn't have happened here. Not on our street." But as hours turned into days, and days into weeks, the questions only deepened. There was no sign of forced entry, no tire tracks leading away, no footprints in the soil. Ethan seemed to have simply vanished, as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Suspicion, of course, crept in as it always does. At first, the police looked inward. The parents, Karen and Michael, found themselves interrogated not as grieving victims, but as potential suspects. Their tearful pleas for their son's safe return were broadcast on local television, but behind the cameras, detectives scrutinized every detail of their marriage. Every bruise or scrape Ethan had ever carried, every financial difficulty that might suggest motive. But nothing stuck. They were cleared. And so suspicion spread outward. Among the rows of neat suburban homes, one stood out. Weather-beaten siding, unkempt hedges, and a man who rarely joined the neighborhood barbecues or waved at passing cars. His name was Howard Green, a quiet, reclusive figure in his late 50s who lived alone after his wife passed away a decade prior. Howard was questioned, like everyone else. His property searched. Detectives noted the old, boarded-up well in the back corner of his lot, but at the time, it appeared sealed and long unused. Dogs sniffed around the perimeter but found nothing. Howard had no criminal record, no history of violence, nothing to connect him to Ethan's disappearance. After a few tense days of rumors, the spotlight faded from his house. The case went cold. Years drifted by, though for the Williams family, time stood still. Birthdays came and went with an empty chair at the table. Karen kept Ethan's room exactly as he'd left it. Toys neatly lined up on the dresser, a small Spider-Man blanket tucked over the bed. Michael buried himself in work, his silence a mask over his grief. But both of them carried the same wound. The not knowing. The endless loop of what-ifs. Every year, on the anniversary of Ethan's disappearance, the family held a small vigil in the backyard. Neighbors would gather, candles flickering in the twilight, as Karen whispered into the night, "If you're out there, baby, we're still waiting." By the 5th year, hope was wearing thin. And then it happened. It was August, a brutally hot summer. Howard Green's property had fallen into even deeper disrepair. The new owners, a young couple who'd purchased it after Howard quietly passed away in his sleep, decided to renovate. As part of the cleanup, they hired contractors to dismantle the rotting boards that sealed the old well. The boards cracked under the crowbar, revealing a dark, yawning mouth into the earth. The workers peered inside, expecting nothing more than stagnant water and weeds. But what they found was something else entirely. A shape. A small, fragile shape at the bottom. The sheriff's department was called immediately. Floodlights illuminated the backyard as crime scene tape went up once again. Not at the Williams home this time, but just 3 doors down. The well was drained, and the recovery team descended. What they pulled up confirmed the Williams family's worst nightmare. Remains. DNA testing left no doubt. After 5 agonizing years, Ethan Williams had been found. But the discovery raised even more questions. How had the boy ended up there? Why hadn't the original search uncovered the well? And most of all, what role had Howard Green played in all of this? The medical examiner revealed a chilling truth. Ethan's remains showed no signs of falling. His injuries were inconsistent with an accident. There were marks, restraints. This was not a tragic mishap. This was deliberate. The neighborhood reeled. The same man they'd waved to occasionally, whose lawn grew too tall and whose windows stayed dark, had harbored the darkest of secrets on his own property. Digging into Howard Green's past revealed troubling patterns that had gone unnoticed. Complaints from former neighbors in another state about children being lured near his property. Anonymous reports filed but never followed through. Small fragments of suspicion that pieced together painted a portrait of a predator hiding in plain sight. For the Williams family, the truth was a cruel mix of relief and devastation. They finally had an answer, but it was an answer that tore them apart. Karen withdrew from public life entirely, consumed by guilt for the 2 minutes she'd left her son unattended. Michael, once stoic, broke down at Ethan's funeral, clutching the small coffin as if trying to pull it back from the earth. The community, too, changed. Doors that had once been left unlocked were now bolted shut. Children were kept within eyesight at all times. The illusion of safety in their suburban enclave had been shattered forever. 5 years of waiting had ended not with a joyful reunion, but with a discovery that confirmed their darkest fears. A child's laughter had been silenced in the very place he should have been safest, his own backyard. And in the end, the answers had been waiting all along, hidden in a neighbor's forgotten well. The story of Ethan Williams is a reminder of how fragile the thread of safety can be, how quickly an ordinary summer evening can turn into a lifetime of grief, and how secrets, no matter how deeply buried, have a way of surfacing eventually. For the Williams family, the nightmare is over, but the scars remain. Their story continues to haunt not just their neighborhood, but anyone who has ever let their child play freely, believing the backyard was a sanctuary. Because in this case it wasn't.